Well. Many thanks for staying with us here on the Spotlight. And of course, the time of reckoning has come. Tonight on the Spotlight, I speak to the sitting Vice President of the Law Society of Kenya, Faith Moni Odhiambo, who is also gunning to be the President of the Law Society of Kenya. Madam VP, thank you very much for being with us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Always a pleasure. Now, let's just get straight into it. Before we talk about, your quest to become the president of the Law Society of Kenya, I want us to start with, the issue of upholding the rule of law and grounds of judicial independence. Because recently, and of course, the spark between the judiciary and the executive, of course, that led to the, dialogue between the arms of government, the president, the chief justice, and the leadership of the, two houses. First of all, what do you make of, the spark between the executive and the judiciary?
My position in the same is that the judiciary have a role to play, and as required under the Constitution, they're the last bulwark with regards to them upholding the rule of law. They're the ones that we go to in a context that you expect that there's a fair body that will sit and listen to the disputes and make a fair decision based on, of course, the law that you present before themselves, and upholding what is most important. Our backbone in this society is the Constitution, the very same that created all the three arms of government. You have that expectation that when you go before the courts, that the courts will equalize the difference between those who are high in power and those who are not. That it's the place where it sets apart everyone is same before the law. And so when we see the executive trying to direct how the judiciary should be doing its work, and what was quite unfortunate was the statements came right before the Court of Appeal was sitting to make its decision. And we were watching closely because LSK was a party to those proceedings that were happening on the Financing Act, particularly on the housing levy that we had challenged. And the courts made the decision, and the Court of Appeal indicated that they won't be granting them any stay. And that's the first step in terms of, irrespective of the statements and the veiled threats that have been made by the head of state, who stands as the symbol of unity of a nation. And the people of the nation are looking up to what he's saying, because you must remember that he was voted in by a majority, and the courts ascertained and also upheld that decision. And so when he's the one directing that kind of narrative, particularly to this arm of government that can only speak through their decisions, it's quite unfortunate that we have a head who is supposed to be protecting the Constitution, the very same that brought him to the office. That was the first oath that he made, and even the various statements that he continually stated after that was that he will be the protector of the Constitution. So when we see the head of state going against that very, that tangent that he had started, then that's abuse of his powers. Court decisions should not, the court is not independent when they make decisions according to how you want. You cannot play the piper. We cannot allow the executive to direct what the judiciary should do, which is a separate and independent arm of government. Okay,
but from where you sit, do you, regard the concerns of the president as genuine? Because we've had cases of, judges being accused of corruption, and of course, in some cases, it was proved that yes, indeed, they were, corrupt in a way also. So from where you sit, do you feel the concerns of the president are genuine?
The reason why I raise concern, or I don't feel the genuineness of those concerns, is they only come, or they only arise at the backdrop of orders that he wants with regards to his agenda not going in accordance to what he wants. If it was genuineness, that would have been part and parcel of some of the agenda items he would have taken up even as he started. He said he would uphold the rule of law. He ensured that the judges who had not been appointed during the previous regime that he was part and parcel of were sworn into office. And part and parcel of then, he would have stated that, yes, irrespective of me having upheld the rule of law, we still need to look at the question of corruption in the judiciary. You see, when you're genuine, you don't need a personal cause that you're following up on to start raising hue and cry. And why I also feel that it's not genuine concern is that at the backdrop, we have had the past year scores of corruption at the executive. We have not seen the president cracking down on cabinet secretaries, on PSs, having them arrested and arraigned in court. We have seen a reshuffle. So it means you're either reshuffling the problem somewhere else, and even the ones that have ceased to hold office are still raising concerns, saying that you haven't dealt with the cancer. You've left the main cancer in the executive, and the small fish, are now standing out. What have we seen in terms of what efforts has he made to ensure those who have emptied or stolen from the coffers of the members of the public in his executive, he has held them to account? So yes, there could be concerns, yes, of corruption, and that's a concern that also the Law Society has and raises. But the question is, when is this concern arising? His lens is only able to see corruption at the backdrop of when decisions that he seeks that that he wants to ensure things that align with his agenda are not going through. That's my concern. Okay,
from what you're saying is that there's corruption in the executive.
Yes.
So, in one way or the other, are you admitting that yes, there's corruption in the judiciary, but the president should first of all focus in corruption or on corruption in the executive?
I believe that the president should focus on corruption everywhere, and there is a process and procedure if you believe there's corruption in the judiciary. There is how the JSC is there. You should be able to collect evidence, stable, and we saw a good instance recently. One of the judges who left the High Court, he went through due process.
Agree, Mushalule.
Yes, and apart from that, he was able to even lodge an appeal to the Supreme Court after the president affirmed the decision of the tribunal. So there was clear due process that was followed. Even these judges that are alleged corrupt, why can't they also follow through the due process? It's not roadside decisions or saying you will deal with them personally. That is not the rule of law. It means that we are going back to an archaic society of man eats man, an eye for an eye, a tooth for the tooth. That is not the constitution that we serve. That is not the constitution that we uphold.
Okay, fair enough. If at all there is corruption in the judiciary, as the Vice President of the Law Society of Kenya, it also means, or, do you admit that partly lawyers as well could be, part of the mess? Because if there's corruption, it cannot only be one way. If the judges are receiving, bribes, it is coming from somewhere.
The reality is corruption, yes, has to start from somewhere. But the challenge is that we're even having other societies that you'd hear even stories of, judicial officers directly approaching or brokers directly approaching clients, even excluding the advocate. So I wouldn't place the advocate entirely at fault. But that's a discussion that we've started and we're having also with our members, that we need to find a way to deal with corruption. And if it means starve the judges, starve the magistrates, then that is a tangent that we're willing to take. That we also need to take responsibility and take the bull by the horns. That the only way we can clean our profession, which is beneficial to all of us as a whole, is that we also take that mantle and fight corruption, even from within. That we do not allow any stakeholders, any brokers to come between the rule of law.
Now, part of your mandate under the LSK Act is, of course, to advise the government and even the courts, I believe, on matters of judicial administration of justice and all that. On your part, what have you done in regards to that? And as well, as you respond to that, there's the issue of defiance of court orders, because this regime has been on the spot in regards to respecting court orders, and to some point they've been saying those are just papers. What do you make of those sentiments as well, as a society, that is?
Now, first of all, I would start with, in regards to what have we done. The Law Society has raised also with the Judicial Service Commission complaints. And by virtue of the responses we normally get, that table evidence, what we are done is we are forming a task force that will go around the country collect evidence that we will table strongly before the Judicial Service Commission, that will also, as the Law Society, take a strong position, even when they're reviewing promotions or members who are seeking to join the bench. We will always take a strong stand, and we want to start with those who are currently serving. We will collect that evidence and table. We have decided that as the Law Society, let us take the mantle at the front and let us be the one to table this evidence before the Judicial Service Commission and watch brief and ensure that judicial officers that we're able to show that they are corrupt, let us have them leave the bench. Let those who want to serve with integrity continue sitting at that level. Now, with regards to saying that court orders are just papers, what we did is that we did the march of protest for the rule of law. And part and parcel of what we wanted to do, we also raised concern with particularly our members who are sitting in Parliament that have made such scathing remarks. We have threatened before with regards to the prosecutors who have gone against the rule of law to issue dishonors for them, so that even the day they want to get practicing certificates, that they would be denied and they would have to face trial before disciplinary committees. And those are options that we'll be reviewing with regards to our members who are going against the rule of law. Unfortunately, even as we stood strong with the judiciary, what we saw later on is that they backed down, and the head of the judiciary went to have a sit down with the head of state. And I'm not saying that having a normal sit down is bad. Our challenge was that we are discussing important national matters, obedience of court orders, saying that court orders are just papers, going against court orders and proceeding with processes way after judicial decisions have been pronounced, and still purporting to come for audience before those courts.
Right before you jump into your quest to become the president of the Law Society of Kenya, the allegations of corruption have not only come from the president, and I'll touch on one person, Senior Counsel Ahmed Nasir Abdullahi. He's been very vocal in regards to saying that the judiciary is corrupt, and that is part of the reasons as to why the Supreme Court of Kenya banned him from appearing before the court. And even as you respond to that, LSKs would intervened on that particular matter. Why do you think the Supreme Court of Kenya is not the decision of the Supreme Court of Kenya is not correct in your view?
The decision they made was a judicial decision. So if you make a judicial decision, you cannot be investigator, prosecutor, and jury all at once. So as a matter of principle, the Law Society made that decision because you have to give everyone an opportunity to be heard. A decision was made without the senior counsel having had an opportunity, even if it's a question of contempt. What are the charges? Have you given him an opportunity to respond to the charges? And even above that, you extend the same ban to his firm, his partners, and his associates. So there is no fair or due process. The same Supreme Court that we are standing for, and the judiciary, for protection of the rule of law, they also must know that they are not above the law. They must as well obey the rule of law. So standing with the senior counsel is not a matter of standing with him because he's an individual, he's a senior counsel, or he's vocal. It's a matter of principle, because this is a dangerous precedent that the Supreme Court is setting. Tomorrow, other high courts, other magistrates will decide, you went and criticized me at a meeting somewhere, I ban you from your court. I make that individual decision. I make that judicial decision to ban you from my court. That is a very dangerous precedent. These are public offices that they hold. And the same way the executive is criticized for its decisions, Parliament and Senate is criticized for its decisions, then the Supreme Court might as well have, they also should be criticized. People have discourses with regards to some of these decisions they are made. We have books published arguing pro and cons and why they made such decisions. They should not think that they are special or they are above the law. They are the last bulwark, but we also have that high standard of expectation that they must also make decisions in accordance with the law.
Well, now let's just jump into your quest to become the president of the Law Society of Kenya. Of course, you're seeking to succeed your current boss, Eric Theory. Explain to us your PSP agenda.
The PSP agenda is standing for protection of the rule of law, stability of the bar, and progress of our bar, our practice, and our welfare. We're looking at a law society that has healed or coming from a healing process after 2 years of destabilization. We have set the law society on the right track. We have built in and put in structures of the law society. We are raising back the voice of the law society as a voice that can speak to government with regards to excesses. We can sit down when it comes to matters of rule of law and how to build the law society together. We are looking at how can we work better with our members of parliament in regards to some of the policies and laws that are coming out, that we ensure that they adhere to the rule of law. And LSK also takes a strong position with regards to what kind of policies and laws are coming that are affecting the members of the public. There's the question of corruption that is creeping up, that the law society is going to take a strong stand with regards to the same. And stability is important because after the 2 years that there was a lot of turmoil, we cannot allow our law society to disintegrate again. We need a president that can work with others, can listen to others, can work also with our branches of the Law Society of Kenya to build the law society and steer the ship to the right direction. We're looking at how can we progress our law society. There are new areas of law that are coming up. How can we steer our members towards that direction to also make a positive impact to the society and also the needs that the business people are having. We want to become not only the premier bar by name, but also set up structures and physical structures as well that the Law Society ought to have as our tower. We're also looking at how can we ensure we take care of the welfare of our members. We also must remember that the Law Society is a professional organization. And like all other professional organizations, we must ensure that we take care of our members and their health and welfare.
Okay, being part of the current regime, one Odhiambo, you've been the vice president. Now you want to ascend to power and be the president of the Law Society of Kenya. In your assessment, what have been, what are some of the accomplishments that the current regime has, be able to undertake? You've been at loggerheads with the executive. You sue the government on the, lifting of the ban on illegal logging, on the importation of edible oil, as well on, the appointment of chief administrative secretaries. So, how do you, rate the performance of the current regime, or what are the accomplishments?
I say, apart from the robust PIL that we have been able to do over these 2 years, we are the law society that has stabled and ensured that we have proper structures. We're moving towards professionalism. We are the same law society that has digitized most of the processes that we have members able to get better and faster facilities with regards to their day-to-day needs, their practicing certificates, amongst others. We're the same we are the same council that has ensured that we are working better with our branches. We're trying to build devolution also within the Law Society of Kenya, that we want to see our branches grow as well, that we can also ensure that practice even to our regions at home, that they're able to get proper service delivery, which also in effect affects members of the public. Because if you're able to get advocates at your convenience from Lodwar, from Lamu, from the most remote areas, you'll be able to get an advocate that can offer you good services. Then we ensure that the vulnerable in the society are well protected. And that's the vision of how LSK wants to move in the future, that we are readily available towards service delivery of what members need, but also what members of the public want to see. We are the law society that has reached out in terms of what opportunities are available in how we can work with government with regards to working closely with the Office of the Attorney General to also support in advisory, because we see some of the things coming up and LSK wants to take that pivotal road, that we can advise and work with government in certain instances, but of course still hold the government in account.
Of course, that comes as well after the spokesperson said, and he said LSK is responsible because he blamed LSK because he says LSK's main aim is to sabotage the government's agenda.
That's unfortunate for him to say, because LSK has reached out even to the executive with regards at the inception of our term to the extrajudicial killings, and we tried to hold them accountable, and also the challenges we're having at the Lands Office. And also asking questions with regards even to the kind of practice we do, not only in Kenya, but on the region, and what is the role of the executive in the same. So we tried to sit and also identify areas we could partner with the executive that had been priority. And I remember the head of state had indicated that in his term, in his tenure, he will ensure that the police are not weaponized to attack people. And that's why we raised certain areas. And when we saw things were changing, that's why the Law Society raised its voice. The Law Society, unfortunately, as long as we stand for the rule of law, you will not, the government sometimes will not be happy with you. Our role is not to sabotage any agenda of the government. Our role is to ensure that they adhere to the rule of law. We have a responsibility as officers of the court, those who swore oath to ensure that justice be done to members of the public, that we stand firm to that faith, we stand firm to that oath that we made as advocates. In
your manifesto, even as we wrap up this conversation, you've heavily focused on matters land reforms, and I picked up 3 things. You said you want to agitate for efficiency of Ardhi Sasa, the online platform, establishing rapid land response unit, and establishment of appellate body to review decisions of the land registry. Now, how will all this, of course, aid in the fight against corruption surrounding the land sector? And again, we've had so many cases in the recent past of people being evicted based on court orders. How do we deal with all that? And how these are just 3 of your policies. The rest of the policies that you have in surrounding matters lands. How will you how will you use that to, of course, effect change in the land sector?
Well, the Ardhi Sasa system has come to stay, and we want to use that same system to hold them accountable. That we'll be able to see the faces behind the percentages that we see. That we'll be able to identify who are these officers working behind the scenes. That you don't need to go to the land registries where now you have to search in the dark to try and ask who can help me with this, and then you have to facilitate. Because this is a challenge that even members of the public are having. You cannot be able to get your services without having to first reach out to someone. We want to be able to, and we want to set up also a work plan task force team. The rapid response is that when there are any changes in the Ardhi Sasa system, let them deal first, inform the stakeholders before implementing anything new, because that's how the challenges of the back and forth happen. Because today, this is the procedure. The next day, things have changed. We don't have standard operating procedures from one registry to another, and that opens up also opportunities for corruption, because one land registrar will say this, another will say this in this town and the next town. Let us also, and that will ensure that we find a way to remove the many brokers that are hovering around the land registries. It's unfortunate that we see more brokers looking to do work than the advocates. So you may think you're dealing with a lawyer, and there are complaints that end up coming to us as the Law Society under our disciplinary tribunal, when you'll end up finding you are dealing with a masquerader or a broker that is sitting in the Lands Office that deems to know more. So as Land Registry moves to certain reforms that they want to deal even with the question of evictions, what we want to ensure that even at the NCAJ level, working with the judiciary and the police, that there's proper verification of those decisions that are being made, because it's also corruption when we have judicial officers that don't have jurisdiction issuing orders for eviction without following proper due process. So we want to work closely to ensure that these things are followed to the letter, that we can start holding certain persons accountable. Then we can be able to start stemming out corruption.
Well, finally, what do you feel has not been achieved in the past 2 years under the current regime, which you are part of, that you want to implement? And why should the members of the bar appoint you as the next president of the Law Society of Kenya?
I think the last 2 years we have focused mostly on the PLs that we do, setting our society back in order and just improving the general services. What we need to do in the next 2 years is it's time for progress. It's time to propel to the next level. And I'm the right person to do it because I know the challenges that are there at the Law Society. I've started the vision in terms of we have been moving towards improvement. And so I have that ability to push towards the right direction. And the best person, of course, is myself, because I've sat at the helm. I've been able to hold forth as a strong voice, not only to protect the rule of law, but also to see the direction of the society steer back to stability, but also move towards the direction of progress. We need to be stellar in terms of the services we offer, to support our advocates in the new areas of practice, and that we also support them in the welfare that we need to give to our members. I am best placed to, for all of you members, have faith in faith. Let's move our law society to the next direction. We are going to be great. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Madam VP, for, of course, gracing this particular show tonight. All the best in the forthcoming elections. Just so you know, the elections of the Law Society of Kenya will be held on the 29th of February this particular month. With that, we wrap up this spotlight here on Lookuptv. Thank you very much for, of course, joining us tonight. Do have yourself a wonderful night, and like always, God bless.